It was one of those bitter winter mornings when the air felt like glass against the skin, sharp, fragile, and unforgiving. The sky hung low with heavy clouds, and the streets of Portland were dusted with thin layers of snow that crunched beneath hurried footsteps. People passed by bundled in thick scarves and padded jackets, faces buried against the cold. But amid all the motion, one small figure stood still. A little boy, about 5 years old, clutching his mother's trembling hand outside a cafe window. His voice, soft and innocent, broke through the chill like a prayer whispered into the wind. "Mommy's cold," he said. That was when a man walking by stopped, looked back, and saw her, her lips pale, her hair tangled from the icy wind, wearing nothing more than a thin sweater that clung to her shivering frame. Without a word, the stranger took off his own coat. Before we go further, if you believe the world needs more kindness, compassion, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe to our channel. Let's keep stories like this alive. Her name was Emma Turner, and life had not been kind to her lately. Just 6 months earlier, she had lived what she once called an ordinary happiness, a small rented apartment, a steady job at the grocery store, and evenings filled with her son's laughter echoing against the kitchen walls. But life, unpredictable as the weather, had stripped that away piece by piece. When her husband Derek walked out one evening after another bitter argument about money, he didn't just take his suitcase, he took stability, warmth, and the fragile peace that had held their little family together. Emma's days became a series of quiet battles, waking before dawn to pack lunches she could barely afford, walking miles to save on bus fare, and smiling for her son, Noah, even when she felt the world had forgotten her. Her job hours were cut, bills piled up like shadows she couldn't escape. Some nights when Noah had fallen asleep, she'd sit by the window and stare out at the city lights, wondering how she'd gone from holding dreams in her hands to holding back tears she could no longer hide. That morning had been especially cruel. Her old car refused to start, the rent was due, and the chill in the air seemed to echo the exhaustion in her bones. She had promised Noah they'd stop by the cafe after dropping off a job application, a rare treat, one she could hardly afford. But when they reached the door, she realized she had lost the few dollars she'd set aside. Noah, unaware, had pressed his nose against the glass, eyes wide at the sight of warm pastries and glowing lights. And then, with the simplicity only a child possesses, he noticed her shiver. "Mommy's cold," he said again, tugging her sleeve. "You can have my hoodie." She smiled weakly and knelt to zip up his small blue hoodie. "I'm okay, sweetheart," she whispered, though her voice cracked as she said it. But that was when the stranger appeared, tall, wearing a white sweater and dark jeans, his breath visible in the frosty air. He had been on his way into the cafe but stopped when he heard the boy's voice. For a brief moment, he hesitated, watching the scene. The boy's innocence, the mother's quiet dignity, the tremble she tried to hide. Then without a word, he stepped forward, removed his coat, and gently draped it around her shoulders. Emma startled, stammering that she couldn't accept it, but he simply smiled. "It's just a coat," he said softly. "You look like you need it more than I do." Tears welled up in her eyes before she could stop them. The warmth of the coat felt like more than fabric. It was kindness she hadn't felt in a long time. She managed a thank you, her voice barely audible. Noah looked up at the man with wide eyes, his small fingers still gripping his mother's hand. "You're nice," he said simply, and that made the man chuckle. His name was Liam Carter. A construction supervisor by trade, Liam had lost his own wife 2 years earlier in a car accident that had shattered his world. Since then, he had lived quietly, keeping to himself, going through the motions of life without really feeling much at all. But something about Emma and Noah tugged at a place in his heart he thought had long gone numb. He offered to buy them both something warm, a cup of cocoa for Noah, coffee for Emma. At first she refused out of habit, pride being the last fragile shield she still held on to. But as Liam smiled gently and said, "Please let me, it's too cold for pride," something in her gave way. They sat together by the cafe window, the snow falling softly outside. For the first time in months, Emma felt warmth, not from the heater, but from another person's simple care. They talked for nearly an hour about work, life, and the strange way pain sometimes brings strangers together. Liam listened more than he spoke, sensing her weariness between every hesitant word. He didn't pity her. He respected her strength, her quiet resilience. When she spoke of Noah, her eyes brightened despite the struggle. That, he thought, was love in its truest form. As days passed, fate seemed to keep weaving their paths together. Liam started seeing Emma and Noah more often, sometimes by the grocery store, sometimes walking home from school. Each time, he'd wave, sometimes offering a lift, other times simply a smile that said, "I see you. You're not invisible." Weeks turned into months and small gestures grew into friendship. He helped fix her broken heater one evening and refused payment. She baked him a pie in return, shyly leaving it on his porch. Slowly, the walls around her heart began to melt, replaced by something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. But life still had its storms. When Emma's landlord gave her an eviction notice after she fell behind on rent, she broke down for the first time in front of Liam. She hated feeling weak, but he didn't see weakness. He saw a woman who had carried too much for too long. He spent the next few days quietly making calls, pulling a few strings through friends, and found her a smaller apartment. Modest but warm, close to Noah's school. Emma didn't know how to thank him. "You've done more for us than anyone ever has," she said one evening, as they stood outside under a fading sunset. Liam only smiled. "You've already thanked me," he replied. "You reminded me what it feels like to care again." And for the first time since his wife's passing, he truly meant it. One winter night, as they sat by the window of the same cafe where they'd first met, snow falling outside like gentle ash, Noah tugged at Liam's sleeve. "Mr. Liam," he said softly, "you remember when you gave Mommy your coat?" Liam nodded, smiling. "Now you're part of our family," Noah said proudly. Emma blinked back tears as she looked between her son and the man who had stepped into their lives when they needed a miracle most. She thought back to that cold morning, to how close she had been to giving up, and realized that sometimes salvation comes not through grand miracles, but through one simple act of kindness. Months later, Emma found a new job, one that paid better and offered stability. Liam continued to be part of their lives, helping, laughing, and eventually loving. Their bond grew naturally, rooted not in need, but in trust and shared healing. On a warm spring afternoon, they stood together in the park watching Noah chase a kite across the open field. Emma turned to Liam and said quietly, "You changed our lives that day." He shook his head. "You changed mine first." The wind caught her hair, sunlight glinting off the tears she didn't bother to hide. "I was cold that morning," she said, "but it wasn't just the weather. I was cold inside too, and you gave me back more than a coat. You gave me warmth I thought I'd lost forever." He took her hand, fingers intertwining naturally, as if they had always belonged that way. In that moment, surrounded by laughter and light, the world felt soft again. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's spread warmth and remind the world that kindness still exists. Before you go, comment below, what's one act of kindness you'll never forget? That winter morning began with cold and hopelessness, but it ended in love and redemption. All it took was a stranger's coat and the courage to care, because sometimes the smallest gesture can thaw even the coldest hearts. And that's the miracle of kindness.